Okay, welcome to lecture 2.4. We are now moving on to Julia Nefsky on reasons to help. So um, let's just start out with the main aim that Nefsky has in this paper. So Nefsky's goal in this paper is to show that in order to understand collective action problems, we need to see a rather surprising fact, which is that helping does not always require making a difference. Now, one thing I want to point out and emphasize before we get too far into the details of the paper is that there's a big shift in what we're talking about today, and that whereas the last two papers concerned our responsibilities or obligations, in this paper we're talking about our reasons for acting. So this is a more basic question than the question about what obligations we have. Um, and I think it can help to see how the question about what reasons we have for acting is more basic by considering some little examples. So, here we have a person that's drowning, that's in trouble in the water, and it looks like somebody's throwing this little guy a lifesaver. So we might say something like this: if somebody is drowning, I have an obligation to try to save them. This also gives me a reason to try to save them. So if I have an obligation to do something, in this case, I might think I have an obligation to try to help somebody who's drowning. If I have an obligation, then I also have a reason to do something. However, there are things that I have reasons to do that I don't have obligations to do. So let's suppose that I want a hot dog. If this is true, if I want a hot dog, then I have a reason to find a place that sells them. However, it would be very strange to say that I have an obligation to find a place that sells hot dogs. So I can have reasons to do things that I don't have obligations to do, although I do have reasons to do things if I have an obligation to do that thing. In this way, we might think that the question of what we have reasons to do is more basic, because we can have reasons to do things when the strength of those reasons isn't yet of the right kind to make them an obligation. Okay, so let's talk about the setup of the Nefsky paper. So Nefsky is trying to solve a general problem about collective harms. And what she notices is that there are all sorts of cases where people collectively cause some morally significant outcome, usually some harm or benefit. But in these cases, it seems like no individual act makes a difference. And the problem is that in this context, each individual actor seems to be able to say that it makes no difference whether or not they do the thing, call it X, and so they have no reason to X to do the thing. So what Nevsky is up to is that she wants to diagnose what's gone wrong with this line of reasoning. She wants to say why it's a mistake to say that because I can make no, what I do makes no difference, therefore I have no reason to do anything. Um, and you should note that Nevsky's paper assumes that we have reasons to act in the kinds of cases she's talking about. She's just assuming that we do have reasons to act. It's not a skeptical paper in which she is open to the possibility that we have no reasons to act in these cases. So she assumes that we have reasons to act in these collective action cases, and she wants to provide a theoretical backing for this assumption. So that's what the paper is about. And by the way, you might kind of be wondering, well, shouldn't we be more skeptical? Why should we assume that we really do have reasons to act in these kind of collective action cases? And I think Nevsky's line of reasoning is something like the following. She looks at things we actually do. So she says, look around. Many of us donate to charity. We buy fair trade products. We vote. We do all sorts of things of this sort. And we typically do these things because we think we're helping. She thinks this is just built into our reasons for doing these things. And so she notices that it would be really weird if it turned out that we were all mistaken about the reasons we have for acting in these kinds of cases. So weird that we should look for a view that can account for the fact that we do have reasons to act in these collective action cases. So this is the kind of account she's trying to give. She's trying to give a theoretical explanation of how it could be that we could have a reason to act in cases where it seems like whether we act or not makes no difference to the outcome. All right, so as you'll have seen from the paper, one of the central cases around which the whole paper is organized is this famous case by Derek Parfit, and she calls it the drops of water case. This is a picture of Parfit, who is without a doubt one of the most important philosophers of recent times. He died recently, um, but he has been hugely influential in a lot of different philosophical debates. So the drops of water case goes as follows. 10,000 men are in the desert, suffering from intensely painful thirst. We are a group of 10,000 people near the desert, and we each have a pint of water. We can't go into the desert, but we can pour our pints into a water cart, which will take the water to the desert and evenly distribute it among the men. All right, so here's a question. Do I have a reason to pour my pint into the cart? Suppose I said something like this. Suppose I said, well, it makes no difference whether I do it or not, so I can't have a reason to do it. Now, Nefsky says this is clearly a poor excuse. But it's also not so easy to explain exactly where I go wrong when I give this kind of an excuse. So this is her goal. All right, what is the solution? Well, the solution, according to Nefsky, is to see that helping is not the same as making a difference. And we can sometimes help even when we can't make a difference. So to put it in more generic terms, when we can help by Xing, where X is some action, when we can help by Xing, we have a reason to X, even if our Xing won't make a difference. So this should sound super weird to you. It certainly sounded very strange to me when I first read it, and I think this is a paper that bears a couple of rereadings because it takes a little bit of work to get your mind around the solution, but let's walk through it. So it can help first to set out the stakes. So what's really at stake here? And as I understood the Nefsky paper, she is trying to show us that if we make this very standard assumption that making a difference is required for helping, where she understands helping as making a non-superfluous contribution, we'll talk about that in a moment. If we make the standard assumption that making a difference is necessary for helping, then in the cases we're worried about here, these collective action cases, we'll have to choose between one of these three things. So here comes the trilemma. The first alternative is that we'll have to say, you really can make a morally significant difference. That's one alternative. So when I said that whether or not I pour my pint into the cart won't make a difference, this alternative rejects that claim. It insists that you really are making a morally significant difference. The second alternative is that we'd have to say that you just don't have a reason to do anything. I don't have a reason to pour my pint into the cart. And as I've said already, I think Nefsky is rejecting this assumption. She thinks there's all sorts of cases where it seems we can't make a difference, and yet it seems we do have a reason to do something. Or the third horn of the trilemma is that you do have a reason to act or to do something, but your reasons to act have nothing to do with making a significant individual causal contribution. So for example, you might think that your reason to act has to do with considerations of fairness, maybe you shouldn't be a free rider. Maybe it would be you would be free riding if you just kept your water to yourself and let everybody else put the water in the cart. Sorry. So if we can't if we can't find a solution to the problem that Nefsky identifies, then she thinks that we're going to be forced to accept one of these three options. So this is a three-horned trilemma, and none of these looks good to her. She thinks that in the cases that we're looking at, you really can't make a difference, but you do have a reason to do something. And moreover, that reason to do something does have to do with the significant individual causal contribution that you make. So this is a tall order. Let's see if she can succeed. First of all, we need to be a little more precise about what making a difference is. And this is how Nefsky defines it. Your acting can make a difference if the outcome in question turns on whether or not you do the action. So we're going to use X as a placeholder again. That is, if you X, the outcome happens. If you don't X, the outcome doesn't happen. Now, there are actually two types of collective impact cases where we can use this terminology of making a difference. So one type is what she calls a threshold case. In a threshold case, your act has a very small chance of making a difference. So voting is typically thought of as a case of this sort. It's very unlikely that your vote will be the deciding factor for who wins the election, but there is a possible scenario in which that is the case. There is a very small chance that your vote will make a difference. So this is a threshold case. Non-threshold cases are ones where your act has no chance of making a difference, and drops of water is supposed to be a case like this. And Nefsky is especially interested in showing how, even in non-threshold cases, if it turns out that making a difference and helping are not the same thing, and that you can help even when you can't make a difference, then we get out of the trilemma. And she says if we can solve the non-threshold cases, which are especially tricky, then the same solution will work for threshold cases as well. All right, so we've looked at what making a difference is. Now, how does she define helping? Helping, and here I'm just going to quote her, she says, as I'm using the phrase, by helping to bring about, I mean playing a non-superficial causal role in the occurrence of an outcome. It is, in other words, to non-superfluously contribute to bringing it about. I am thinking that this is a typo, that this should say non-superfluous. I will fix that before I post the slides. Here's an assumption that she makes. She says, on this usage, if acting in a certain way could help to bring about a morally or prudentially significant outcome, then it is a morally or prudentially significant fact and can itself have reason-giving force. In particular, if by acting in a certain way I could help to bring about a good outcome or help to prevent a bad one, that itself gives me some reason to do so. So this is the stage in the paper where she's making an assumption that secures the inference she wants to have between being able to help and having a reason to do something. She says, if you're able to help bring about a morally significant outcome, in our toy case of the drops of water, it is relieving the suffering of the thousands of men in the desert. So she says, if you can help to bring about a morally significant outcome, you have a reason to do that thing, to help. Okay, so this establishes the connection between being able to help and having a reason to do the thing that helps. And she wants to stress that although one might think that making a difference is the same thing as being non-superfluous, this is just mistaken. Okay, we're going to get into some concrete cases in a moment to make this more concrete, but we need to say a little bit more as setup. So let's ask the key question: when is it that you can help? Well, first we have to find out, can you be a part of the cause of the relevant outcome? And Nefsky says the answer needs to be yes. But according to Nefsky, this condition is met in all the cases that we're interested in. For instance, if I vote for Y in an election and candidate Y wins, then my voting will have been part of what caused candidate Y's winning. There are some additional conditions, though, that need to be met for you to be able to help. Okay, so at the time of your action, and again, we're going to call your action an action of type X, and where the relevant outcome is Y, here are the additional key conditions that have to be met. First, it has to be possible that outcome Y will occur. Second, it has to be possible that outcome Y will fail to occur. And third, it has to be possible that Y will fail to occur, at least partly as a result of there not having been enough acts of Xing. So this is the complete story of when it is that you can help. And again, this is very abstract at this point, but let us apply it to some of the specific cases to see how the account works. So we have these three conditions. And Nefsky's view is that if all these conditions are met, then you can help, and you need to be able to be a part of a cause, which she thinks is met in all the cases we're interested in. If all these conditions are met, then you can help, which is to say that you can be a non-superfluous part of the cause, and if that is the case, then you have a reason to act. One question I would like you to ask yourselves is whether or not Walter Sinner Armstrong disagrees with Nefsky on this point about causation. I'm not going to get into this right now, but this is a worthwhile question to ask yourself to check whether you think you have a solid grasp of Sinner Armstrong and Nefsky. Okay, so let's look at some specific cases so that we might make this all a little more concrete. Okay, so let's look at first, let's look at a variation on drops of water. So in this case, drops of water starts out as we've described already, but in this case, the cart is full, and when I approach it, the cart is already full, but I come along with a hose and I force some of my own water in, displacing other water that was already into the cart on the ground. So this is a variation that Nefsky gives, and let's ask all the relevant questions to figure out if I can help in this case. So the first question is, am I part of a cause? And the answer is yes, I am part of the cause, assuming the cart is then taken to the desert and the men have their suffering relieved, they drink the water. I am part of the cause of relieving them their suffering. My water is in the cart. I caused the water to be in the cart. I forced some other water out, but I am indeed part of the cause. Okay, am I really helping though? Well, Nefsky says no. And the reason is that there was no real risk that the people in the desert wouldn't have received what they needed. This is to say that condition 2 is not met. So let me just show you. Condition 2 said it's possible that the outcome will fail to occur, right? Condition 1 is it's possible that it will occur. Condition 2 is it's possible that it will fail to occur. And condition 3 is that it's possible that it will fail to occur because not enough people act. Okay, so this is a case where it's not possible that the people in the desert wouldn't have had their thirst relieved because when I approach the cart, it's already full. So condition 2 is not met, and I did not help. Comparing this to the case of the original drops of water case, remember at this time, when you put your pint into the cart is not full. Let's assume that when you approach the cart is not full. So again, we can ask, am I part of the cause? Yes, I'm part of the cause if I pour my pint in. And am I helping? Nefsky says yes, you're helping. Why is that? Well, when you add your water, there's a real risk at that time that the people in the desert won't get enough water because not enough people will contribute a pint. There's no guarantee that there would be enough contributions when you add your pint, but it also is possible that It also is possible that enough people will add to make contributions. So it's possible that the outcome will occur, it's possible that the outcome will not occur, and it's possible that if it doesn't occur, it's because not enough people did the relevant action, in this case, pouring in their pints. And so all three conditions are met, and when I pour in my pint, I am helping, according to her view. And she thinks this is the right outcome. It seems to her that in a case like this, we should have the intuition that I'm helping. All right, let's do another variation on drops of water. Suppose that at the time when you put your pint into the cart is only half full, but heavy rain has begun to fall such that there is a 100% chance that the cart will be filled by the rain. Okay, so one question is whether or not you are part of the cause. And again, the answer should be yes. If you put your water in the cart and your water is a part of the water that the men drink, you are part of helping to relieve their suffering. I'm sorry, I have to watch my language. You are part of relieving their suffering. Remove the word helping. Now we ask, are you helping? And here again, Nefsky wants to say no. When you add your water, it's already settled that there will be enough water in the cart due to the rain. So again, condition 2 is not met. And again, she thinks that this is intuitively right. In a case like this, if you put your water in the cart, we would be inclined to say that you're not helping. So this is supposed to be confirmation that her account of helping is correct. All right, let's switch gears a little bit and look at a different kind of case. This case is called voting against Mr. Powers. That's what I'm calling it. This is another case from the paper. So Mr. Powers is seeking election. If he's elected, there will be disastrous results for the country. Suppose you vote against Mr. Powers in an effort to prevent his getting elected. Suppose he loses. Yay. Okay, now the question is, am I part of the cause of his losing? Nefsky says yes. Did you help to prevent his election? So did you help? And again, Nefsky says yes, at least assuming it was still possible that he could have won when you voted. So that is to say, yes, you did help if, when you voted, more votes were needed to prevent his election, and there was also a real risk that they wouldn't come in. Now, at this point, you might be worrying that you could never know whether there are already enough people who have voted against Mr. Powers. This seems like a problem, you might say. So what does Nefsky say about this kind of a worry? She says this is true, but this is just further proof that you have a subjective reason to vote. As far as you know, there is still a real risk that Mr. Powers will be elected. This gives you a subjective reason to vote. And note also that this is compatible with you later finding out that you in fact had no objective reason to vote, given that enough votes against Mr. Powers had in fact already been cast, supposing that was the case. Okay, so what is this business about subjective reasons versus objective reasons? In general, in philosophy, subjective reasons are the reasons that you have given what you know and believe. In contrast, objective reasons are the reasons that you have given all of the relevant facts, some of which you might not be in a position to know. So subjective reasons are the ones sort of that you can see from your subjective point of view. Objective reasons are the reasons that are really out there, some of which you may not have access to. So in this voting case, if you don't know that Powers is not going to win, and you know, and as far as you know, he could win or he could lose, you have a subjective reason to vote. From your point of view, given what you know, you should vote. There might be facts out there in the world that if we could know them, we would then realize that in fact Mr. Powers was destined to lose. Maybe there just weren't enough people in the world that were going to vote for him. And that might have meant that you did not have an objective reason to vote for him, if given that it was, say, already settled that he would lose. but you didn't have access to this reason, so you had a subjective reason to vote for him. And I want to just note that there are a whole lot of debates about how exactly to characterize these notions and how exactly the notion of subjective reasons and objective reasons relate to one another. But this general understanding will be okay for this course. If you are interested in more, here's a link, and I'll be posting the slides so you can just click on that link later. Okay, so Nefsky thinks that even though she thinks that she's established in her paper that we can sometimes help without making a difference, because she's giving us a rather counterintuitive and controversial view, she needs to give us with an error theory that explains why we often mistakenly believe that we can help only if we can make a difference. So an error theory is a theory that explains why we are in error about something. In this case, the error we make is that we think we can help only if we make a difference. And Nefsky thinks that she needs to give an explanation of why we so often make this mistake. And what is her answer? Well, she says that the reason we make this mistake, the reason we think helping and making a difference always go together, is that in typical non-collective impact cases, when an action can't make a difference, it also can't help. So we're just used to thinking that these things go hand in hand, given our experience with non-collective impact cases, sort of ordinary individual action cases. So let me give you an example. Suppose you're taking this course pass-fail, and suppose that just before the final paper, you calculate that even if you get a 0 on the final paper, you will still pass the course. In this case, handing in the final paper will not make a difference to whether you pass the course, and it also will not help you pass the course because you've already passed. So this is a case where it's just about your individual action and whether something can help and whether something can make a difference. These two things really do go hand in hand. Okay, now suppose instead that you calculate that you can pass only if you get a B plus or higher on the final paper. Then turning in the final paper will make a difference to whether you pass the course, and turning in the paper can help. So when we kind of reflect on these cases involving individual action and not collective impact cases, we see that oftentimes helping and making a difference do go together. Nefsky's point here is that collective impact cases are special in that helping and making a difference do not go together in these cases. We have reasons to help in collective impact cases, even when we cannot make a difference. And the reason we so often fail to see this is that we're used to thinking about ordinary cases not having to do with collective action. All right, so it's important to ask here whether her overall argument is watertight. Should we accept her conclusion? Should we accept the conclusion that says we have a reason to act in collective impact cases, whether it's voting, whether it's a drops of water like case, whether it's climate change. We have a reason to act, but that reason to act is grounded in the fact that we can help, which does not mean we can make a difference. That's the conclusion she's trying to make us accept. So is her argument watertight? I can't answer this for you right now. I think we have to think about this a lot, actually. To me, there are a few aspects of her argument that seem slippery. So I'm sort of undecided about whether or not I fully accepted her view. And all I want to say right now is that if you feel like something is amiss, that is okay. But if you feel like something is amiss, you need to figure out where the argument goes wrong. So we either need to accept her conclusion or figure out where it goes wrong. Those are sort of our two options. Um, I will leave that task to us to do in the future. And it might turn out that she's right. It's a cool view for sure. Um, and sometimes the right view is a little counterintuitive and does take a little bit of time to grasp. So once again, I look forward to hearing how your reactions to this paper were. I know that it's hard. I had to read it several times, and even now, I feel like each time I read it again, I notice something new and I understand it a little better. So just take heart and yeah, keep at it. Okay, I will see you all hopefully in Zoom class.